Yipee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon.
Yipee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falconers. Welcome back. Today we're talking about the Rocky movies. We're going to be ranking them, ranking all of them in order of best film. Now that's the best objective film. That doesn't mean our favorites. That doesn't mean the ones that we nostalgically love. And I'll be joined by my regular co-host and longtime friend TJ. And this is kind of a good setup because I have a lot of nostalgia for Rocky movies. I grew up with them I grew up with 1 through 4 since the fourth one came out in 85. We were both born in 83. So they were always there as far as I was concerned. And I mean, the fifth one came out in 92. So, still pretty deep into childhood for both of us. However, whereas I watched them to death most of my life, TJ didn't watch some of them until he was an adult. He'd seen the first couple. I think he said he's seen 1 through 3 as a kid at some point, but he certainly didn't watch them like I did, and he didn't watch them on repeat. They weren't a huge part of his growing up like they were mine. But as he got older, he learned to appreciate them, and apparently I made him watch them so often. He just grew to dig the series of films, but he didn't see Rocky 4 or 5 until he was an adult. And man, I'll tell you, the contrast there is really interesting. Something like Rocky 4, when you grow up with it and you see it for the first time as a young child, and things you don't question about it as a movie are remarkable. The things you just accept, right? And him seeing it as an adult, so much of it stood out as weird and gimmicky and strange. But so many of us who grew up with it, watching it, have these really nostalgic feelings about it and get pumped by the training scenes. I mean, that's kind of a staple of Rocky movies. Since the first one came out, there's always a training montage, and it gets you all psyched up, and you're going to the gym, right? That next day for 2 days, maybe 3, and then you got to watch another Rocky movie. Maybe it catches, maybe it doesn't. It usually doesn't. But Rocky 4, as I say in this episode, is basically 4 montages strung together by a bit of dialogue. It's kind of reduced itself to the most identifiable aspects of the Rocky movies that were once Academy Award nominated films, and made them, cartoonish, as everything was in 85, big and dumb and bright. And it was awesome if you were like 8 years old and saw that movie for the first time, and we're all into, U.S. and Russians are the bad guys, and that's just, what the world is like in movies, black and white and simple. It was great when you were that young. And it's a big deal to see it as an adult. It's very different. So we get into that. We crap on Rocky 5 a lot. We do. So be prepared. And if you like that movie, I'm sorry on a lot of levels, but this is not going to make it better for you. So come on, we'll expose our soft underbelly and give you our Rocky rankings again by the objectively best films in order, and we'll get into them. So come along with us, and don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us, and leave your comments. Tell us what your rankings are. Leave both. Tell us what your favorites are, and tell us which movies you think are the best movies objectively. If they're different, please let us know. And thanks for joining us. It's Rocky Day. We have thought pondered and thought some more. We have ranked all of the Rocky movies that feature Rocky Balboa.
That feature him.
That
Right.
we say that because of Creed fucking 3. We'll get to that maybe if we have time, but it doesn't have Rocky in it, so it's not a Rocky movie.
It's worth a mention, but it's not on the list.
Yeah. So I saw a boxing movie today that I'd never seen yet.
What's that?
Big George Foreman.
Big George Foreman.
Yeah,
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a biopic about George Foreman, whole life and shit. I think Netflix made it, and it was pretty good. This guy named Chris Davis plays him. I mean, it's not actor. I mean, it's not Academy Award shit, but he got the physicality down. If you ever watched Foreman fight, like he got that weird stance he had and that like kind of stiff spine, bat and arms thing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he
was
got
a
that
monster.
down hard. Yeah, and he the fat suit looked good from when we remember him during his comeback.
Puffy
when we
George
were kids. Yeah, puffy, bald, selling grills, George Foreman. But the thing that struck me is that there's a piece of his life story that I don't know. It happened in the late 80s, so it could have happened that Stallone may have just mined for Rocky 5. I didn't know this about Foreman, but apparently his longtime friend was his money manager. And in the movie, they make it very clear that this man is going to steal George Foreman's money from like the first time you see him.
Oh, you just don't trust him at all.
He's got a rat face. He's got his shirt unbuttoned way too far at the collar. And he's got a terrible little, dirty little mustache. And he's very pale. He's very, very pale.
Like Peter Lorre.
Oh, yeah. Paul Bettany pale.
Okay.
But so he ends up, George ends up going to the bank and find out he has like $2,000 to his name. And it's basically the exact same thing that happened to Rocky in Rocky 5, except, for Rocky it was Paulie, who they weren't super clear about it, but that was the whole plot of that horrible movie, was that Paulie had invested Rocky's money somehow and lost it all.
Oh, he blew it, yeah.
Yeah, and then they had to sell the mansion and the motorcycles and the horse, and then had to move into Paulie's shitty old house, which he apparently still owned in Philly. But I thought it was funny that actually really happened to George Foreman, and he started hawking barbecue sauce and shit on TV, and couldn't make enough money. He had a huge family. He'd been a preacher for years after Ali retired him, basically. And
didn't he name all of his kids George?
Yeah, I don't know if he had any daughters, but all the boys were named George. Jesus. And not like with numbers either. They were just all fucking George, man. I remember when we were kids, that was always on a talk. He had to answer that question on talk shows every time you saw him. And he was very jolly. Remember, like he was very personable. Comeback George was a very sweet man. Apparently he was a mean son of a bitch when he was young.
Prime George was terrifying.
Have you ever watched the Ali fight, the Rumble in the Jungle?
I have, of course. Yeah, it looks like he's gonna kill him, and he nearly does. But like somehow, like people don't appreciate the amount of punishment Ali actually had to take in order for that to work. That was only gonna work if he survived it.
Yeah, because in theory, it sounds easy, right? Leaning against the ropes and letting him hit your arms. I mean,
yeah, but
George
they
Foreman
don't all
hit
hit
so
your
hard.
arms.
Yeah, and he hit so hard that your arms do hurt after a while after getting hit, and they get numb.
They don't stay up.
Yeah. So he had to be very careful with that ballsy strategy, but it worked against a much stronger man. So let's talk about fake boxing now. Fake boxing,
yeah.
So I mean, I guess I'm a ridiculous Rocky fan. I always have been.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, you knew this from when you met me when we were in high school, right? I mean, it was never a secret, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for whatever I put you through. I'm sorry for how many times I've made you watch these movies. But you grew up watching these, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that I'd seen them and I enjoyed them, and then like when we kind of met, it was I had to watch a lot more of them, but in a way, it just gave me like I really like saw them for the first time. Like before that, I'd been like, oh yeah, I'd seen this and I liked it, and yeah, watching them in a much later, I came to appreciate them a lot more. And it kind of turned me into a boxing fan to boot.
Right. Yeah, me too. Me too. I don't think I would have given a shit about boxing if it hadn't been for Rocky. And it's all my dad's fault.
Of course.
Just in boxing movies in general, too. Like, he showed this to me when I was really, really young. Because, I mean, there's nothing really objectionable in it.
Right.
For kids. Like, anything that is a little bit, no kid would understand. Especially today. But even in, in the 80s and 90s. The 70s shit was kind of, out of reach, the slang and whatnot. But, yeah, man, that and Somebody Up There Likes Me, which was the Rocky Graziano story with Paul Newman. I remember he taped that off TV because that was one of his favorites when he was younger. And watched the shit out of that. I didn't see Raging Bull till I was older, for obvious reasons.
That's a heavy one.
But yeah, man, the Rockies, dude, it was just a regular rotation for me. And what a fucking disappointment that the only one that came out while I was like old enough to realize it was Rocky 5. And then years and years and years until another one.
Right. Oh yeah.
But hey, let's do what we're here to do. Let's rattle off our rankings of the best Rocky films in order. I'm going to let you go first.
Oh man. Okay. Well, thank you, Dave. I would say, and this is coming from someone who was a very casual Rocky fan who eventually grew into like, I wouldn't say a fanatic, but definitely a fanboy. So I have it as number 1, Rocky, the first one, the original.
Right.
I doubt you'll find a list that doesn't have Rocky as number 1.
I mean, it's one of those movies that's in a different tier now. It's like On the Waterfront and and The Godfather. It's just a classic. Like it's
transcended the genre. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could even make an argument that there should never have been any sequels. And imagine what it would have been like if it stood alone. But there are, so we're here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So number 1, Rocky 1, absolute classic. My number 2, oddly enough, is Creed. And I put it there. Yeah, I put it there because, I was such a big fan of those movies. And then they kind of took a dip, there's peaks and valleys. But then when Creed came back, oh man, like it came back with a vengeance. It like brought Rocky back into modern times. And for that reason, like I really liked it.
Okay.
3, I have Rocky Balboa because that is just like low key a great movie. People wrote it off because like they just called it to them it was Rocky 6, but I really enjoyed it. 4th, I have Rocky 2, and that's only as low as it is because it feels a lot like Rocky 1, which I've seen, and it's got a different result. After Rocky 2, 5th, I have Creed 2. Which again, like I loved Creed, and Creed 2 was great. And then to round out the bottom of the list, it's Rocky 3, Rocky 4, and then Rocky 5, just in numerical order. And yeah, we can get into the reasons why, but that's my list.
All right. So generally, you like the newer generation of films better than the original sequel run.
In a way, yeah. I mean, like the first one, like I said, is a classic. But there are some low points in the original run that I think some of the newer ones stayed away from.
All right, I can agree with that 100%. But my list is different. It is different.
I would expect nothing less.
All right, in the top slot, I've got the original Rocky 2 as well. Not Rocky 2. Rocky as well.
Rocky also.
Rocky also. It's the same reasons we just said. There's nowhere else it could be in the list. So there's really no point in talking about it.
Right.
I have Rocky 2 right after it because in my head it's always they seem like two chapters of the same story cuz they always existed as far as I was concerned, right? Like Rocky and Rocky 2 came out well before we were born. I think Rocky 2 may have been like the year we were born, I forget. But they were always there, and the second one seemed like you actually said it, like it seems so much like the first one, right? The cast is similar, the look and feel is the same. They filmed most of it in Philly. Again, after that one, the sequels had very little Philadelphia in them.
Right.
But Rocky 2 still was mostly filmed in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have it as 2. Right? Like, yeah,
That makes sense.
It is kind of the same thing, but I really like the fact that you got to see Apollo Creed as he really was. Like in the first Rocky, he wasn't paying attention to the fight. He was being a promoter, right? And not training, and which is why Rocky was able to last as long as he could. And in the second one, you see Apollo Creed as the champion. You get to see him in boxer mode, and
beast mode.
Yeah, and at the same time you get to see Rocky trying to like live. The whole first movie he's got this mission, and he's driven, right? And we could talk about his motivation and everything for a while, but in the second one he's kind of lost. And I thought that was kind of ballsy to do with your hero, like the regularity of regular life and having to get a job and pay bills. Like you kind of get a feel for why Rocky wasn't in a great place when we met him in the first movie. Like he wasn't good at life and money. He wasn't good at much, but he had a big heart, right? Okay, so I'm sorry. In third place, I have Rocky Balboa. I put it up high, too.
Yep.
It's excellent. It's an excellent movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, it was a true relief. I saw it in the theater. Did you see it in the theater?
I did not see it in the theater. No. I watched it when it came out, but yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, it was a tremendous relief, especially where Stallone's career was at the time. He wasn't putting out good movies. He was at a real low point in his career, and then you heard he's going to make another Rocky movie.
Yeah, Rocky 6.
And the jokes were merciless. Old man Rocky. They had already been making jokes about how many sequels there were for years, and now this one where he's, the character is 10 years older than Foreman was when he made his comeback, and the actor is 20 years older.
And to be fair, the actor's in incredible shape in that movie.
It's bizarre. And I don't know what he was on. I don't know what kind of HGH he was injecting into his ass or whatever. But the dude showed up. He showed up to be Rocky. And it was just and I talk about this to my wife all the time. The courage and the wisdom of killing Adrian off.
Yeah.
Fucking excellent. The movie
Genius.
would not have worked. None of it would have worked. That's the reason for telling this story in Rocky Balboa. So he made a lot of great choices. Everything he did wrong in Rocky 5, he fixed and did right in Rocky Balboa. And
he really did.
If that was his mission, he killed it.
Can I just say one thing about Rocky Balboa? It has low key, like the best, not the best, but one of my favorite little bits of casting. And it was the guy they got to play Rocky's son. What was his son's name in the movie? I forget his
Robert.
Robert, okay.
Rocky Jr., but the implication is that Rocky's real name is Robert, and then people just called him Rocky.
The guy they got to play his son is Milo Ventimiglia.
Yep.
Who's a fine actor, but the only other man whose face does the same weird thing as Sylvester Stallone's. Yet like that weird like lower lip thing where he juts his lower lip like down and away from the rest of his mouth, but then the top right corner of his face doesn't move. And it was always like Rocky. They kind of informed the whole way that he talked. And they found the one guy whose face does the same thing, and he's Italian. I mean, his name's Milo Ventimiglia, for God's sake. He's got the most Italian name on earth, and like he just looks the part. I was like, oh my God, yeah, they nailed it. That's Rocky Jr. All right.
And they managed to find an actor who was short enough to be believably his son.
Yeah, it was a perfect bit of casting in my. It's like I'll buy that 10 times out of 10.
Milo or Milo, however you say it, his face just kind of does that naturally. But you know why Stallone's face does that?
I actually don't. I know it's like paralyzed in some way, but I don't know the reason.
When he was born, back in the day, they used to grab the baby's head with forceps and like drag it out. I don't know why they stopped doing it, and partly because of what happened to him. Doing that caused nerve damage on the side of his face. So that's why, like, when he opens his mouth, one side goes down. That's the side he can feel. The other side doesn't because it's numb. And he had, that's where his weird speech impediment comes from, too. It's not really an impediment. It's like just kind of a drawl, right?
An affect.
Yeah, sure. An affect. And he has a really deep voice, too. So it's very distinctive. But yeah, they did a great bit of casting because his real son played Robert in Rocky 5, of course. Right. Sage Stallone, who has since passed away.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. He died of a overdose, I believe, maybe 5 years ago. 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, he had some troubles. I don't know if you saw it. Netflix did a documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I did not see that, no.
It was just called Arnold. I think it was a 2-parter, and then they did just a single episode one about Stallone, just called Sly. Check it out if you're interested. It's a neat tour through his career, and then he gets into some personal shit. It's one of the first times he's talked in public about what happened to his son. And all that, and it's neat. It's a neat look into, and he reveals some shit that he never said before.
Yeah, I'll watch that.
When he starts talking about filming the Expendables series, he really reveals some shit. Yeah, it's cool. It's worth checking out if you're a fan. All right, so after Rocky Balboa, I have Creed. Also,
okay.
All right, I mean it's the next chapter of that story. And it's just really strong. For a spinoff, man, they really, I didn't think it was going to work. Again, I heard the premise, and I just really didn't think it was going to work, because we saw part of this before. We saw Rocky trying to be a trainer in Rocky 5, and anything from Rocky 5 is kind of like, yeah.
Verboten.
Yeah, like you don't want to tread that ground again. But again, maybe Stallone didn't have the control of Creed that he did of Rocky Balboa. Like he was the director, the writer, and the star of Rocky Balboa. And Creed had like a whole normal studio production setup. And of course, a different lead. But I think he got to retread some ground from Rocky 5 and do it right this time. Again.
Oh, yeah.
Again,
he definitely was supposed to become Mickey. You know, that idea worked and was always like meant to be. It's just they botched it in Rocky 5, you know, and it was worth going back to, and it works in Creed.
And again, like killing Adrian in Rocky Balboa, I think giving him cancer in Creed was a great idea. And when I saw it in the theater, I didn't read anything about it. I really tried not to read anything. I thought he was going to die. Like, I thought they were going to fucking kill Rocky off.
It did feel that way, didn't it?
Because it's, you know, it's a spinoff, new lead. They gave him fucking cancer. He looked really bad. You know,
he looked terrible.
It was scary. It was like, Rocky might be checking out here, man. Oh,
it worked, though. It all worked.
No, it absolutely worked. And The story itself is believable. The premise, the existence of Adonis Creed, all of it. I didn't think I would like it, but I did. And right after that, I've got Rocky 3, and then Rocky 4, and then Creed 2, and last but not least, Rocky 5.
Okay. Yeah, you have Creed 2 a lot lower than I do. And that's fine,
I do. Only because I think it relies really heavily on Rocky 4, which isn't that strong of a movie.
Right.
And I think if it had had more of an original story, I might rank it higher. It could have been better, but I'm not saying I don't like it, right? I mean, I had to put it somewhere, but it's I don't like it better than the original run of sequels. Let's put it that way.
No, that's fair.
It was a trip seeing Dolph Lundgren again as Drago.
Dolph Lundgren, the most terrifying actor on earth, in my opinion. Like, on screen and off, that man is impressive, but also terrifying.
What's so terrifying about him for people who don't know?
Number one, look at him. look at him. And then he almost killed Stallone when they you heard about that bit, right? When he punched him in the heart.
Yeah, he bruised his heart.
Yeah, he's just like, I really want to sell this take. Why don't you hit me right in the heart, Mr. Multi-year world full contact karate champion? You are the one who I'm choosing to have punch me in the chest for real. And he paid the price. It put him down. They had to stop the movie for a while.
That's and that Stallone doesn't learn, because that's not the first time that happened to him. When he was
who else hit him?
When they were filming, I believe it was Rocky 1, the original Rocky. You know how Joe Frazier has that cameo?
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah, Joe Frazier tapped him.
Yeah, he showed up one day when they were filming stuff in the ring, and Slide wanted to fuck around with him a little bit in the ring real quick, and Joe tagged him one and cut him right over the eye and everything, and they had to stop filming for the day.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Frazier, like he probably pulled that punch too, but the man was just such a bruiser. Like, it's gonna, if he lands one, it's gonna do damage. And like that, like also Rocky 1 was kind of my introduction to Joe Frazier. He's like one of my all-time favorite boxers. The guy was unbelievable, and like that's kind of how I learned who that guy was.
For a minute,
the real like legendary Philly boxer, Joe Frazier. Yeah, I mean the guy was incredible.
For a minute, they were toying with having him be the Apollo Creed character.
Wait. Joe Frazier was gonna play Apollo Creed?
They were thinking about it. They were toying with the idea. I think it was an earlier version of the script where Apollo didn't have as much of a part.
Like a much smaller role.
Yeah, he was just really in the ring. Like, it was going to be limited to the fights and everything at the time, and it just didn't work out, and the script ended up changing.
I did not know that.
At least that's how I learned about it.
Well, I mean, I think that what they did really worked, though. I mean, Carl Weathers, number one, was great, but time has been much kinder to Muhammad Ali than it has been to Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier was unreal, but he got a raw deal.
Sure.
From Muhammad Ali.
Absolutely.
But like, he wasn't as large in life as a character as Muhammad Ali was.
He was really popular around here. Around the Philadelphia area, obviously because he's a Philadelphia son, but also I think in the Northeast, I don't think Ali was as popular as he was out on the West Coast and in other parts of the country. Like, there's a lot of blue-collar fight fans, back in the 70s here, and, Frazier was them. Joe Frazier was them.
He was like the blue-collar champ, And then Ali was something else. Like, he was just larger than life.
Yeah,
and He did Joe Frazier dirty, but that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole thing. All right, so let's talk about your second place choice, if we could. Putting Creed so high up. Other than what you said, and what we've said, what about that makes you rank it like right underneath Oscar award-winning legendary film Rocky?
Because I think the first one is so good because it shows like Rocky's struggle, right? And his like indomitable will. And I think like Creed and during all the other movies, like he becomes a different boxer and he's learning his place in that world. Like from Rocky 1, he's like a total outsider, right? He doesn't belong in that world, but through sheer force of will, he bashes his way into it. You know, even though he loses the fight, he bulldozes his way into that world and puts himself in the center of it. But in every movie, he's like learning his place in that world. And I think like Creed was the first time you saw him enter a whole other phase of that world with the same kind of uncertainty as the trainer, you know, and like yeah, technically he did it in Rocky 5, but like that movie's garbage, you know.
We can just act like it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it may as well not exist. But the Rocky story. I mean, I know it says it's called Creed, but it definitely feels like a Rocky movie. And to me, it's the most interesting thing to happen to him since Rocky 1 is when he can't box anymore, but he can pour all of that into another fighter. And also like they have this perfect fighter for the story purpose in, you know, Creed's son. And not to mention just the way they film the boxing in that movie is incredible. I think like the ring scenes are amazing. And the training, no Rocky movie is complete without a training montage. And Creed has like a banger of a training montage.
Yeah, Creed's is good. It's very good.
But they turn the tables. Like Rocky's running it. He's not the one training. He's running it.
You know, it was a true update. Creed was a true modernization and update of, like you said, the story. And
right.
I appreciate that a lot. And I appreciated that they didn't... there's a lot of different ways they could have gone with, you know, just the balance of Rocky and Adonis, you know, and just... But what they struck on was just right. And you get to see Rocky in another fight. But, you know, this time he's only fighting for himself against an opponent he can't see. And it's something, you know, unfortunately, at this point, if you are an original Rocky fan who was around when it came out in theaters, you're getting to his age or you're there. So you're keenly aware of this. And others of us, our parents are, you know, in their 70s now. And we know people who've had to battle cancer and maybe have won or lost. And it struck me as a very, very good way to ground it in reality emotionally, you know, without being cloying. You know, it wasn't saccharine. They could have really made it stupid. They could have made it real dumb. But I don't know. Emotionally, it didn't feel like the movie was trying to manipulate the audience. I don't think.
Well, I'll tell you one thing about that movie. I remember when we used to watch Rocky movies together, you used to quote it, right, while it was happening. But not everything. You know who used to quote was Mickey. You know, like you would quote the Mickey bits. And especially like when he's having flashbacks, he's like, because Mickey loves you, you know, and like, and I look over and you're saying it right along with the movie because there's something special. You pay attention to what comes out of the old trainer's mouth because the guy just like drops wisdom, you know, and the one scene from Creed that like, man, like it gave me goosebumps when it was happening. And I hope you remember this, but like it's right before the big fight against Pretty Ricky Conlon, and they're in the dressing room. In the camera, it's like a continuous take. Camera comes down the hall. They come into the room. Creed's hitting the pads, and then like Rocky kind of puts his hands on his shoulders, and they start swaying from side to side.
Yep.
And then the camera starts panning around the two of them, and he's giving them this pep talk. But it's not like he's not screaming at him. He's just like, okay. And I don't remember exactly what he says. But he's talking him up. He's talking low, and he's just getting him ready for the fight of his life. And I remember thinking, like, ooh, I just felt something. I don't know what it was, but I felt something.
If I remember correctly, I think he's repeating that sentiment about making fear work for you,
Right.
and not letting it consume you and shit. But yeah, no, I remember exactly what you're talking about. And
that mantra.
Yeah, because
one step at a time, one punch at a time, one round at a time.
Right. And doesn't the shot begin looking at them in a mirror and then pan around to the actual, to the cameras on them, but they're reversed? I think it does. I remember that scene really working, It just like everything else in that movie, like, again, it could have been really corny. If you hear about any element of it and you haven't seen it, man, you would kind of assume it's really corny, but they just struck the right tone, man. They really did.
They had a good director.
No, I would.
That was Ryan Coogler.
Ryan Coogler?
Yeah, Ryan Coogler.
Ryan Coogler. That's a good name, Coogler. I like it.
It's the guy that did Black Panther.
Yeah, I know. I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, I mean, you can say what you want about Black Panther. Creed is a great movie, and like Ryan Coogler just like knew what to do with it.
Now, I ranked Rocky Balboa higher. I think. All right, I want to talk about the fight scenes a little bit.
Okay.
Creed's fight scenes are pretty epic, right? And they do some really neat stuff with slow motion and transitions that they never really tried before. The Rocky series always set the bar for fight scenes. Like, they always had the fight scenes before Rocky. You can see there's a line. Like, that first movie drew a line in the sand, and then after that, every movie had to try to do better. And then they kept one-upping it and got to the point of like superhuman ridiculousness. But for Rocky Balboa, they filmed the fight after an actual fight in Vegas. I think at the MGM.
Oh.
So they used
the ring looked the way it was supposed to.
It was a real ring. They used a real audience. They asked the audience just to stay. And then when they found out why they were there, they all lost their fucking minds, and they didn't even have to tell them to chant and shit. They just did it. But they also used HBO's cameras. So that fight is filmed from the angles and camera positions that HBO used for their fights at the time. So it looks, and if you look at, it's lit incredibly bright. There's no movie lighting. Like, it's lit. It's fucking lit like an actual bout.
It feels like a broadcast.
And that had never been done before for a movie, and it hasn't been done since. So I thought that on top of figuring out a way to resurrect the character of Rocky Balboa after all those years, and on top of it, redefining what a fight in a movie can look like for the grand finale, it's fucking awesome, dude. And the ending was incredible. I guess the only reason I really rank it above Creed is because of that, and because it's not a spinoff. And for what it's worth, I mean, Creed is kind of it's a spinoff. It's not a direct sequel. It's not part of
it's a spinoff.
But yeah, I mean, it's a nitpicky difference. It's a really, really nitpicky difference.
For me personally, I was able to look. I chose to look past the fact that it was a spinoff, and for me, it just felt like another Rocky movie. But yeah, it is a spinoff.
All right, so those are the easy ones, right? Because they're the good ones.
Yeah,
they're the easy ones to talk about. Now, 3 and 4 can get divisive when you talk about them, and they're very, very different from the preceding 2 films. And I mean, if you know about Stallone's life story and about his career and everything, you'll see that they're a reflection of where his career was at the time. Just like the original Rocky kind of was. And he was broke, fucking nearly homeless, sold his fucking dog, and held firm about, he wrote this script. He knew he had something, and he wouldn't sell it unless he could be in it and play Rocky. And he gave up a big payday to do that when he didn't have anything. And I mean, that's Rocky. That's kind of the story of Rocky, right? Well, Rocky 3.
Yeah, in another form.
By the time Rocky 3 comes around in the mid-'80s, Sylvester Stallone is a huge worldwide superstar. First Blood has come out. He's entered a new echelon of stardom, and he's rich as shit. And that's kind of where Rocky is. We find him there, and I don't know. What is it? What is it about the tone of Rocky 3 that's so different? It's not nearly as realistic and grounded as the first two.
It's hokey. It's
okay.
Hokey. Well, I mean, they should, like, you just look at the beginning of that movie. If Rocky 3 is like that's Clubber Lang, right?
Okay. Yeah, Clubber Lang is, for anyone who doesn't know, Clubber Lang is the antagonist in Rocky 3. He's the big bad that Rocky has to fight, essentially.
Played by Mr. T.
Yeah. The
hokiest dude. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Mr. T, but he's ridiculous, with the chains and the earring. It's just, he's a caricature.
Yeah, and you have to remember, that was his first appearance anywhere. Like, no one had ever heard. Yeah, no one had ever heard of Mr. T before. That was before the A-Team.
That was before the A-Team?
That was before the A-Team. That was his first ever anything. Was Rocky 3 that launched his career.
I thought Mr. T was a thing.
No.
Before. Oh.
So you have to.
That's even more ridiculous then.
Kind of, yeah. But I mean, you have to look at it in like, I don't know what they were. I mean, it was the 80s. Just having him in the movie is a very 80s decision to make, isn't it? Like, who are you going to get Rocky to fight? Well, we're going to get this absolutely ridiculous dude with a mohawk who has Indian feather earrings and shit, and like you said, piles of gold chains and everything that Mr. T was. He was also really fucking jacked.
Oh, he's huge.
Like, let's not, but the man, I don't think he had ever put on boxing gloves before in his life. He only throws hooks. Did you ever notice this? He only throws just like giant power hooks. It's incredible. It must have been so easy to choreograph, but
yeah, just tell him to swing.
And there are some fucking moments in this movie. I don't know. I probably should have ranked Rocky 4 higher than 3, but 3 has a special place in my heart because of how Mickey. There's a few things. Okay, it took balls to kill Mickey, and it's sad. The beginning of that movie it's something, right? Like they leaned into everything they did really hard. The idea of him and Apollo Creed becoming besties. I
forgot about the beach scene.
It's questionable. Yeah, the fucking beach scene. Jesus God.
The beach scene is incredible.
So I don't know what you're doing listening to this if you've never seen Rocky 3, but if you saw it
for the uninitiated.
Yeah, if you saw it years ago and you don't remember, and you might be thankful for this.
Perhaps you've repressed it.
During the big training montage of Rocky 3, I believe there's 2 of them, but this is the big one, the big final one. Rocky is training with Apollo Creed in Los Angeles. He's training the way Creed trains because the whole idea is that Mickey has died. Creed takes over.
Apollo needs a new trainer.
Yeah, he takes over as his trainer, so he's going to make Rocky fight like him. Completely like different styles. He's more of a Muhammad Ali type of fighter. Very light on his feet, moving.
Stick and move.
Yeah, high energy instead of like the slugger, stand still and soak up punches with your face.
Punching bag
strategy that Rocky usually employed. He made Rocky into a boxer in a way that Mickey couldn't, I guess is what they were trying to say. Well, this all culminates in the most emotional running scene ever put on film.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I've never seen a more emotional sprint in my life.
So it's a bookend, right? Because there's a scene earlier in the movie where Rocky and Apollo Creed race each other on the beach, on the shoreline, like right nearly in the surf. And while Rocky can't even run, he's so mentally fucked up from Mickey dying that in the middle of the run he gets all distracted, and there's all this voiceovers of shit that happened when Mickey died and everything, and he lost his belt to Clubber Lang, and he just like kind of stops running, and Apollo gives up on him, and then they have to have him and Adrian have to have a big emotional on the beach, heart to heart.
Well, that, and he needed the eye of the tiger.
He needed the eye of the tiger, the thrill of the fight.
He finds the eye of the tiger
through Adrian bitching, which
right.
And she's so fucking awesome in that too, because she tells him how the fuck it is. Like the scene.
Oh, she's great.
The scene is a little like, ugh, but man, she really just whips him down. She's like, just you're being a dick, bro. Like you're not seeing shit right, and she just tells him, dude. And
come on, get to the good part, Dave. And then what happens?
There's a reprisal of the beach race.
They go again.
And it's, like I said, it's during a montage, and there are all these bizarre slow motion close-ups of quadriceps pumping like horses. It's so fetishistic and weird, and it culminates with him and Apollo hugging arm in arm in the surf, fists raised. I don't know who won. I guess because Rocky just barely won, and they're
Rocky
celebrating. Yeah, that's what it was, right?
They keep changing the camera angle for like a new angle of this ultra masculine, sweaty, wet beach hug.
Yeah, and they're in shorts and tank tops with high socks.
Oh God!
Right? Like you have to this is some early '80s training shit. Like we're lucky they weren't both wearing headbands. It's a very homoerotic scene. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But
as far as things sticking with you after the fact, I mean, that one really sticks with you. And for that reason, maybe that's why it is where it is on the list and not a little bit lower. I mean, just if I'm being honest.
When I was a kid, I didn't pick up anything weird with it because it was like the way cartoon characters celebrated and shit, right? Captain America.
Well, I didn't see that when I was a kid. I saw that when I was like 18 years old, and the whole time I was like, what's happening?
You had never seen Rocky 3 before?
I watched it as an adult much later.
Oof. That colors things.
Happened. Yeah, it changes the way it changes things.
So I guess you didn't see the fourth one until you were an adult too?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. Yeah, it changed a lot for that one too.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between seeing that movie when you're 12 and when you're a grown person. It must have been pretty ridiculous.
And don't get me wrong. I enjoy it, but like watching it in its entirety when you're not a kid, you do ask a lot of questions that you wouldn't normally ask when you're a bit younger.
Yeah, it got really, there's no other way to say it. It got really cartoonish. If anyone doesn't know, there's a giant robot in it.
Happy birthday, Polly. Happy birthday, Polly.
You got it, stud. She loves me. Who taught her to talk like that, huh? Love it or hate it. It's another like 80s time capsule. So you have to appreciate it for the crazy Adidas tracksuits and the fact that there was a fucking robot in it, and the fact that a scrappy boxer from Philly overcoming personal demons has turned into a clash of East versus West in the Cold War. Man, I don't know. I never even thought about what it would be like to see that movie as an adult. It never even crossed my mind. And I'm sorry. Sorry you didn't get...
Let me tell you, Dave.
Go ahead, tell me, because...
It's weird. It's a bit weird, because when you're a kid, you don't know what the Cold War is.
No.
And
we just knew Russians were always bad guys in movies. That's all we knew.
Exactly, yeah. And you don't remember the 80s the same way as it's presented in Rocky 4. And you're like, I don't, this never happened. This never happened in my neighborhood. But, that being said, I'll say, like, it's awesome. It's great. I mean, it is where it is on the list for a reason, but if nothing else, it's entertaining, especially because, like, it follows the formula. You get a bitchin' training montage. One of the best training montages, in my opinion. The barn scene where you watch Stallone do exercises that no human should be able to do.
Yeah, he did some real shit on camera there. Like, he was really in shape for that movie.
He looks like he's carved out of wood in that movie.
Shredded like a Julian salad, man.
That's the best shape he's ever been in for any of those movies is Rocky 4, I think.
And the most unbelievable shape for any kind of boxer.
Oh, yeah. No boxer would get that shredded.
Dude,
but
the guy has like 1% body fat. Like, he could probably barely stay awake. He had so little body fat. He talked about how bad his health actually was when he was filming that movie because he cut down so much. But yeah, man, it was impressive. It was impressive. And it's popcorn, man. It's a popcorn movie. It really is, and it's just it's not even a movie. It's like 4 montages strung together by dialogue.
And a little bit of propaganda.
A healthy dose of propaganda from James Brown, mostly from James Brown.
Oh yeah, and Creed, Apollo eats it in that movie.
Yes, he does. He dies. If he dies, he dies.
If he dies, he dies.
Like Drago, like they finally said, "Fuck it, we're making the villain a straight up villain. Like, he's evil. He was a bad man. We're not even." I mean, there's a little retribution at the end when he gets all riled up about being a puppet of the Soviet Union and screaming about how he's going to fight for himself. Yes, yes. I don't know. I know the lines in Russian. That's how many fucking times I've seen that fucking movie. No, it's just so much fun. And the driving montage, right? Come on, man.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
There's no easy way out.
Fucking, what is that, Robert Tepper?
I don't know.
I think that's Robert Tepper. Yeah. I've driven to that song. It's awesome. It's a good time. It's a good time. Like I said, yeah.
And then the speech.
Oh, at the end? Oh, my God.
Yeah, the speech.
It's so... that's where... Scenes like that are why they invented the word cringy. That is a cringy fucking speech.
Change, and you can change,
and
everybody can change,
and it's made even more ridiculous by the fact that there's a Russian announcer trying to
translate
that after each line, and he's standing. It's ridiculous. It's just all ridiculous. Did you see the new cut of Rocky 4?
I did.
Okay.
I did see that.
All right, cool.
On your recommendation.
Oh, sweet. I'm so glad you listened to me. So if folks don't know, Stallone got really bored during COVID and couldn't make movies or do anything he was working on. So he owns the rights to Rocky 4 insofar as he could do a new... I guess technically it's not a director's cut, right? Because he didn't direct the original film, but a new cut, entirely new cut of Rocky 4. And we're not talking about just adding a few deleted scenes or, extended scenes or anything like a typical director's cut. This is a complete retooling of the movie from beginning to end, essentially, with alternate takes used, different sections of dialogue that weren't in the original film, completely different music. Not all the music is gone, but the score is way less synthy. Like, basically what he did was he made it way less dated. He tried to make it as less dated. He got rid of the robot and a few other things, and he tried to generally make the tone of the movie more serious. So there's a lot of jokey shit in the original Rocky 4 that he cut out, and he cut out his ex-wife almost entirely. If you notice, Brigitte Nielsen, their marriage didn't end well. They were like together at the time, and man, she has what, like 2 lines now in the whole movie. He excised her. But what do you think of it?
You know what else was cool? Yeah, they brought in, that movie starts at the end of Rocky 3.
Right.
With him beating Clubber Lang.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, they show the like, as per tradition.
The whole beginning of the movie is the end of the previous movie, but like it works. It's just like it's a much better way to start that story.
Well, what they got rid of was the way the original starts is every Rocky movie usually shows the end of the fight from the previous film and then begins, right? So Rocky IV originally showed the end of his fight with Clubber Lang, the last round, and then it showed the entire end of the film where him and Apollo met up in the gym to have like a sparring session. And the idea, I think, was to prove who was better now that Apollo had trained Rocky, right?
Off camera.
Yeah. And at the beginning of Rocky IV, Rocky comes home with a black eye from that sparring session. But they cut all that out because they cut out the robot, they cut out Paulie's birthday scene, they cut all that shit out. So it doesn't start that way anymore. So it just starts with the fight and then goes right into the story. And that
right. It works.
Yeah, it totally changes the feeling of the beginning of the movie. It's less airy and goofy. It's less goofy. That's what it is. Rocky IV is goofy.
It's goofy as hell.
It's goofy, and it girds your loins in so much that it's, I don't know. The training scenes are awesome. It's just like a total dumb dude movie, and that's where its awesomeness comes from. You know, he like fucking Rocky runs up a mountain and screams his enemy's name like it's Braveheart shit. You know?
Yeah, he does scream. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and like even like we were saying, the that speech at the end, they changed that. He used different dialogue that they had filmed for that, and it's way less corny. Lots of choices like that. So I mean, if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out because it's not just little tweaks to an old movie. It's a completely different feeling film. And I mean, you saw the original Rocky cut when you were an adult, and then obviously saw the recut when you were an adult. What were your impressions?
I mean, I like the recut better. You know, like you said, it's just it's way less goofy, and for certain, if that one is like the one I'm considering on a list, it lands higher than like second to last. I mean, it was cool because like Rocky 3 is also a goofy movie, you know, like he fights Hulk Hogan, for God's sakes, Thunder Lips, right? There's a lot of goofball shit in that movie, but there's way more goofball stuff in the original Rocky 4 cut. So like if you take that recut and throw that in the mix, oh yeah, it's much higher on my list. I mean, it just turns it into something that you're supposed to take seriously instead of something that you're just, you know, that's clearly meant to have like a bunch of jokes in it.
Yeah.
So
I think, you're absolutely right. Rocky 3, until Mick dies, tries to be much jokier and lighter. And
when he's training and they have like that in that his training session, there's like a golden grand piano.
Yeah, the
in
goofy
bubble machine.
Yeah, they wanted to.
He's just sitting there like hitting a bag.
Like
there's like a juggler in the back. There's a bunch of stuff happening.
They wanted to show that Rocky had strayed from his roots, and they just went way too overboard. That's all. That's what that all was.
It looked like he was training at like Willy Wonka's factory.
Yeah.
It was completely ridiculous.
It was a photo op. It was basically just a photo op. Again, he didn't take his opponent seriously, yada, yada, yada. It was a fairly simplistic story that really relied on playing on people's emotions as hard as possible. And Clubber Lang was not a well-drawn antagonist. Like, he's a piece of cardboard. You know, we know nothing about him other than that he's mean and scowls a lot, and he trains by doing pull-ups on giant nails in a wall. Like,
As you do.
as one does.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was really simplistic. They decided to focus on this relationship that developed between him and Apollo instead, and Rocky finding himself again, you know, now that Mick is gone. So you can keep fighting. It comes off hollow, you know, it does. It's not, and then Rocky 4 is no better at all. It's just bigger and louder and brighter. And that's another thing he changed 80s. in the recut. He toned down the saturation overall. Like, you really do see a difference. He really tried to get that, because it really is, man. That thing is just a bright, shining painting. You know, the original cut. It's so 80s.
Well, yeah, when you have Apollo Creed wearing his, like, sequined red, white, and blue vest and hat, dancing to Living in America, you know, like, it's just so in your face and over the top.
I mean, that costume was in the first movie, but they even made it even sparklier for this. Like, everything was just turned up too much. Well, that's cool. That's cool that you were able to see it. It's, and like I said, it's very different when you grow up with it, because Rocky 3, seeing Hulk Hogan in a Rocky movie was just like, oh yeah, of course. Because Hulk Hogan is like one of the biggest fucking wrestlers that everyone loves. Hulk Hogan, and he was in the Gremlins movie, and it just made sense, you know, when I was 12. Maybe younger. It was younger. Let's be honest, I was younger. I was watching these movies way too young. I know.
I mean, they're fine.
I know these movies
for a young kid.
like people know songs. Like, I can listen to them and I know I know every line. I know every line of every one of these, of the original 4, right? And so watching that recut was really weird for me, because you know, I'm expecting a next line of dialogue and it's not there.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
So it was really, I could definitely, the differences were extremely stark, and it was unnerving at first. You know, because
I had a totally different experience. I'm sitting there watching it thinking, like, why didn't they just do that the first time?
Yeah, no, and it really made me wonder. It really shows you how much of the final product is in the editing room, and how a movie can be completely ruined or saved in the editing room sometimes, depending on what they have to work with.
I've heard people describe it as like you find your movie in the editing room.
Mm-hmm.
You have all this raw footage, you start chipping away, and then in the editing room is where you find it. You find your final cut.
Do you know the story about the editing behind First Blood, real quick, as a little tangent?
No.
The original cut.
Tell me.
The original cut of First Blood was like 3 hours long, and it was so bad that Stallone tried to buy the negative so he could destroy it, and he wasn't able to. Like, he actually tried. He wanted to wipe the movie off the face of the earth, right? So he wasn't able to do that, so he convinced the studio to let him take a crack at editing it. And what he did, apparently Rambo had all these corny one-liners and shit, and all kinds of dialogue throughout this movie, and he just cut it all out. He basically made Rambo almost a
Really?
Yep. He cut it out, cut it down to a tight, whatever it ended up being, 90-ish minutes. And that's how he saved First Blood and created a multi-billion-dollar franchise that lasted for 40-ish years. And I did not know that. It almost died. And like, he's talked about it in interviews, and he's talked about how bad the dialogue was that he had done from the original script, and it might have destroyed his entire career if he had let that movie come out the way it was.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's fucking wild. We can get into
First Blood's a great movie.
There's a lot to talk about with that movie. We'll have to do something about that on its own. But But
stay tuned.
Stay tuned, everybody. Stay tuned. And I guess, all right, let's. God damn, a final word.
Rocky 5.
A final
Rocky
word
5.
about Rocky 5. And what's wrong with Rocky 5?
Everything. Like, where do you start?
This is. You can think of this as the 90s Rocky, I think, because it's the only Rocky movie that came out in the 90s. And it's so stereotypically 90s. It has a rap, like a general hip-hop soundtrack, which is bizarre for a Rocky movie. It's got, I mean, the kids... I don't even know where to start. It's just a clusterfuck of a fucking movie.
Oh, his son.
Yeah, his son, and
with his earring, his dangly earring.
Because, man, like, so his son goes from being this Richie Rich, overachieving academic prowess, all through the roof kid, just to show that he's not dumb like his father, to being a poor kid who has to go to public school in Philadelphia now. And it's just one of those movies where you're just like, no kids act like this. No fucking kids who are like 12 or 13 years old act like this. Ever. It's never happened. And Stallone's acting is so... Like, they bring back Rocky's brain damage in a way that's like... Like, what the fuck is it? It's not even realistic. So the whole premise is that he can't fight anymore because... He got so brain damaged from the Russian in Rocky IV that he just can't fight. He has these headaches. He sees shit, and they're like, if you get hit in the head a few more times, you could die. So Adrian makes him stop fighting. He can't fight. Paulie loses all his money. They have to move back to Philly. And it's like a return to everything in the original movie. Like, Adrian has to go work at the pet shop again, and he still owns Mick's gym. It's like the only thing he has left. So he opens up the gym again and starts running the gym and finds this young guy to mentor instead of his son, who's... It's just...
Tommy Gunn.
Tommy Morrison, man. They finally fucked up, and they got a real boxer to play a large part, and they got Tommy Morrison, and who is now dead, and is most famous.
That's a sad story in itself.
His career, his whole story is really fucking sad. Like, he wasn't a great boxer, but he was a middling boxer. You know, he was a middling heavyweight.
He could have been very good.
I mean, he beat some real people, like some real names in his time. And when he was on his way up, a lot of people thought he was going to go places, and that's why he got into this movie. Like, he was supposed to be the next big thing, you know, in an era that was dominated by, God, who was fighting? Like, I think Tyson was in prison at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So like, it was like Holyfield,
Riddick Bowe.
Yeah, Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, and then later, yeah, and you know, this was
Lennox Lewis.
Yeah, this was this white dude with a mullet, you know, who looked like he was from Kansas. So he was different. You know, he caught people's attention, and he got into this movie, and man, he's not an actor, and it just shows up everywhere.
He's god awful.
He's terrible.
God awful.
Whenever they give him more than 2 words to say, it's just torturous. The only scene he really did all right with was the dinner scene where he's talking about his relationship with his father, who used to beat him, because he played it real. He downplayed it. You know, he didn't ham it up, and he played it real subdued, and it kind of worked. But
less is more.
But I mean, that's one scene. I don't know. Maybe they had him do high energy versions of every scene, and that's what they kept. And it's another editing room mistake. But the movie just never gels. It never works. And I don't know. They made Rocky too brain damaged. You know?
What does he say on the roof? He's like, Rattlers.
Oh my God. All right, so that's a whole Philly thing in and of itself, because for people who don't live here, there's a very popular morning radio show called Preston and Steve. They're one of the last radio shows hanging out. They're a morning talk radio station, and they're very Philadelphia, and they isolated this soundbite from Rocky V where Stallone's on this rant about Sandler.
Sandler. Dave's taking one too many punches to the head.
I'm getting punchy. He's, I don't know, babbling about Santa like his kid cares, and he talks about rantlers on the roof, and he's just rantlers. And they used to play it constantly, year round. It wasn't a Christmas thing, and it just became part of like that Philly radio lexicon. So, yeah, they literally made fun of that movie 100 times a morning, and it deserved it. It's goofy. It tried to be. It was almost like they went back and tried to ruin the original.
Right.
By showing so much.
The Rocky movies work because they follow kind of a formula. In this one, they tried to flip the script and do some things that were off formula. Like, number one, like Rocky didn't fight
in the ring.
Yeah. He was, that's where I'm going. He was the trainer. He became Mickey. But then, like, the final fight is not a boxing match. It's a street fight, as Rocky so poignantly says, "My ring's outside. Let's go outside," you know? And okay, fine. But a couple things. Number one, that fight is ridiculous. But number two, Rocky wins the fight. The Philadelphia police, Philly's finest, show up and arrest Tommy Gunn and just let Rocky go.
They do,
because
don't they?
Because he won the street fight. That's not how that works. Street fighting of that kind, I'm pretty sure, is illegal for all parties, no matter who wins or loses. It's not like, oh, you beat that guy down? Okay, you may go, sir. You like wuss, you lost the fight. You get to spend the night in jail. That's not how that works.
Yeah, but
he just gets to go home.
He's Rocky, man.
But then he put the Don King character. I forget his name in the movie. God, you know what I'm talking about. He's like, "Come on, touch me and I'll sue. Touch me and I'll sue." So then he clocks the guy, and he goes, "Sue me for what?"
Yeah.
And still, no one sees fit to like arrest Rocky for cold cocking this guy in the middle of the street.
Look, I'm gonna let you in on a secret here. Sylvester Stallone could beat the shit out of anyone on a street in Philadelphia, and the cops wouldn't do anything. I want people around the country to understand this. The people of Philadelphia treat Rocky as if he is a real person. It is the most bizarre thing, and I'm there for it. But we just had the first ever Rocky Day in Philadelphia.
I was unaware of
Yes, last weekend, Stallone came to the Art Museum steps once again and hung out by the statue, and they had the first ever Rocky Day. I think what it is the Art Museum of Philadelphia is in financial trouble, and they're finally saying, fuck it, we're going to cash in on the fact that the most famous thing about our museum is Rocky, which is kind of sad because it's an awesome art museum. It's a fantastic place, but
it's great.
Let's be honest. The only reason the world knows those steps is because of the Rocky movies. And for folks who don't know, the statue that was introduced in Rocky 3 at the top of the Art Museum steps never actually lived there. It was only there for the movies while they were filming it. And for a long time, it lived in front of the Spectrum, the stadium where the 76ers and the Flyers played, which has long been since demolished. And at some point in the aughts, they finally moved the statue back to the art museum, but they didn't put it at the top of the steps. They made like this little park alcove thingy next to the steps for it. And it's a huge tourist attraction, just like the steps are. And now they built a little Rocky store. You don't know this probably either. But they built a little Rocky store out there. It's like a pop-up store. And it sells memorabilia from the movies. But, like, it's not... Like, they sell robes, like Rocky robes and shit.
Like boxing robes?
Yeah, but... And they sell, like, boxing trunks, but they're like copies of the props. Like they're the same size that Stallone wore.
Oh.
Like they're not to be worn. Like they're literally things to.
Oh, you can't buy like a small, medium,
No,
large.
no.
You get one size.
And it's the same size that he supposedly wore in the movie. So basically, it's stuff to sell to frame, or to hang.
Right.
It's memorabilia. It's true. It's true memorabilia. And I mean it's bizarre. Like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia hit on this a little bit too. Like there's a weird dissonance that Rocky is been around for so long that it's almost like he's part of Philadelphia sports, even though it's just movies. And
that's true.
It's a weird thing, and I don't know that that's ever happened. I don't know if there's anything comparable to it in entertainment and in a real city like that. I mean, so many things have been set in New York.
I don't think so either.
I can't. I've tried, and I can't. I think maybe the only thing you could maybe compare it to, but it's not even close, is like movies about Vegas that are intrinsically Vegas-y, But Vegas and Philly are just two completely different animals, and people in Philadelphia are insane about their sports. You're insane about your sports. You're a maniac. You're all maniacs, all you Eagles fans. So I
guilty.
It was a shame that an entire decade had no good Rocky movies, especially when Stallone was still young enough that he could have been believably fighting in the ring in a movie in the 90s.
Yeah, he could have pulled it off.
He could have still played. I mean, he pulled it off when he was old, for Rocky Balboa. So it's. I think maybe things have been lost, but again, Rocky Balboa was so good that you just kind of want to forget about Rocky V, and you could watch these movies through without Rocky V if not for the fact that there needs to be some explanation as to why he's no longer rich at the beginning of Rocky Balboa, why he's living back in the neighborhood and all that. Because without Rocky V, there's no explanation for it.
Well, he's not necessarily. He's got the restaurant. In Rocky Balboa, he's got the restaurant.
Yeah, he's got the restaurant. So
you could just you could assume, you could reasonably assume that he put the money into the restaurant.
Yeah, but I mean,
he had a palace.
Yeah, he's got like Beverly Hills mansion shit going on in Rocky IV, man. Like, I guess in my head canon, I can get around Rocky V by the fact that how these stories go for so many athletes in all kinds of professional sports, not just boxing. Athletes, when they're past their prime, a lot of them do kind of turn into regular people, because they don't have a lot of money coming in anymore. They weren't big enough to do endorsements or whatever it is. Like, there's a lot of
where their money's tied up.
Yeah. I mean, they have to
in a palace.
They have to eventually downsize. So you could look at it like that. That maybe they downsize to a really nice house in Morristown, New Jersey, after the palace. Right, and that's when they opened the restaurant, and then maybe after Adrian died, he just said fuck it and moved back to the house they owned in the neighborhood. So he'd be closer to the restaurant, so he wouldn't, have to remember the house that they shared together, which is difficult when
you can ignore it.
You can ignore it if you get a little tiny bit creative. You can utterly ignore the existence of Rocky V.
And you probably should.
But I'll admit, I like the final fight. It is ridiculous. It's a cartoon.
The street fight?
I do. That's the only part of the movie I will watch. Like, if I'm doing like a completionist thing and I'm watching the whole series, I will just go right to the end fight and just watch that. Then I don't have to watch the rest of the movie. What?
Presumably, Tommy Gunn is a trained boxer in the movie who has a shot at the title.
Yeah, he's in shape.
Right?
He's in shape.
Yeah. And so the man knows how to fight.
Yeah.
He's a real live boxer outside of the movie. Mm-hmm. And when called upon to fight in the street, his tactic is to sprint at Rocky, who like hip tosses him, and then he sprints at him. Like he just keeps running. What boxer worth their salt would just run at a guy? It doesn't make any sense.
Hey, look, man.
That's why I hate it.
We ain't got no rules on the streets, okay? There ain't no rules on the streets, and apparently,
I know, but he abandons all logic,
when
too.
freed from the strictures of pugilistic rules, Tommy Gunn just wants to charge. That's all he wants, man.
Oh God,
that's what we're and Rocky just wants to sweep the leg.
He does. Johnny sweeps the leg.
We never knew it, but Rocky could have been winning every fight if only he was a kickboxer. He should have been a kickboxer because he could have just fucking cleaned up.
He fucked up.
Again, when did that movie come out? 92? That's like the same year Home Alone came out. I was 9 years old, motherfucker. It's nostalgic. All this shit is nostalgic. And man, that's a warning for everyone. Nostalgia goggles can be extremely blinding.
Oh,
So
yeah, absolutely.
Because
I saw that movie when I was like 20.
Yeah, man, that must have really fucking sucked, huh?
It was bad.
Fuck, yeah. I mean, it sucked when I was a kid, and I really wanted it to not
brutal.
suck. I really wanted it to be good, too, back then, and it just wasn't. It just wasn't. Oh, shit.
Oh, God,
but,
it was...
I mean, it's a hell of a series of films. It's an improbable series of films, I think. And it's neat. It's a neat thing to be into. It's a neat series to learn about and to watch every once in a while. And not everyone obviously has to be a fanatic about it like I am. But I'm glad that of all things, growing up, it was a good thing to not be not obsessed with. That's not the right word, but just to be into at that age. I think it teaches some good lessons.
Oh, for sure.
In a way that, yeah, it really gets to a kid at that time in their life. Like it really resonates. I'm just glad it was part of my childhood, and I'm glad that I forced you to think of it as more than just some boxing movies, because you're a huge boxing fan, and I think, when did you get into boxing? Because I don't remember you being into boxing when we were in high school, unless it was just
no, I wasn't always into boxing, and it was like it kind of started with like Rocky, and you think there's a lot of good fighting in those movies. There's some bad fighting too that doesn't make any sense, but there's a lot of good fundamental stuff, and you just realize that it's a sport. And then like MMA got big, and I remember watching MMA thinking like, oh, this is cool, I guess. And then I circled back around to like just regular boxing and started seeing a lot of what I had seen in like the Rocky movies, but also you get that, you watch real boxing, you get this whole other element, and I just enjoyed like the chess match, and you get to see some of the things in like the classic fights that every boxing fan needs to see. You think like, oh, I've seen this before. You watch Rumble in the Jungle in the rope-a-dope, and you're like, I've seen that. That's Rocky 3, Mm-hmm. Or you watch someone just outlast another boxer just through sheer force of will, and you're like, oh, I've seen that. That's Rocky 1. Or you see somebody get down on points, but they scored that lucky shot and they beat the count. It's like, I've seen that. That's Rocky 2.
Rocky 2.
They did pay a lot of credence to the real thing in those movies. As ridiculous as they can get, there's a lot based in reality, and it made me appreciate the sport.
And on my end, as a kid watching these, it was a reason for me to ask my dad questions about boxing.
Oh my God.
Because even just from the first two movies, I needed to know the rules, and your dad would tell you, well, championship fights used to be 15 rounds. Now they're usually 12, and every little thing. And the way the second one ends, it's like a school in boxing rules.
Yes.
Like when both fighters go down at the same time, what the fuck happens?
I don't know if they had.
There's rules for that.
Saved by the bell, and not to mention, you watch Rocky, and I had watched it with my dad, and To me, it's just a movie. And then he pipes up. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is just like Chuck Wepner, the Bayonne bleeder."
Yep.
And I was like,
Bayonne
"Who's
bleeder,
that?"
yeah,
And
yeah.
then he proceeded to tell me about the time he met Chuck Wepner quite accidentally in a bar near Bayonne. They were just, apparently the story goes, as he tells it, they were all just doing funny impressions like, "Hey, look, I'm this guy," and someone would do an impression. "Hey, look, I'm this guy," and my dad got an idea. "Hey, look, I'm the Bayonne bleeder," and he smeared a packet of ketchup across his eyebrow, and he's expecting big laughs, and the whole bar just goes like silent, eerily silent. You could hear a pin drop, and he's like, "What? What did I say?" And then they all look down at the end of the bar at this guy sitting there just drinking alone, and they're like, "That's him. That's Chuck Wepner." And he's like, "Oh, fuck." So then he gets up and walks over, and my dad thinks he's about to catch the beating of a lifetime. But then he slaps down a large bill and buys a round for my dad and his friends just because, apparently he was a good sport about it. But I learned that whole story of, that guy who somehow knocked Ali down and took the beating of his life, but he wouldn't go down. He went the distance, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. That's worth making a movie about," It just gives you that extra bit of perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Because in that way, real boxing is part of the Rocky story. Because for anyone who doesn't know, Stallone saw that fight. He saw the Chuck Wepner Ali fight, and that's where he got the idea for Rocky. So much so that Wepner tried to sue him.
Right on
at
down
one
to the
point.
run up the steps.
Like,
He said he used to end his run going up the steps of the courthouse. And who knows how true that is, but
the courthouse steps are not nearly as impressive
absolutely
as the
not.
art museum steps. Way worse view too. We will be talking at some point about boxing movies that aren't in the Rocky series.
Yes.
Because for a lot of things we've said tonight, the Rocky movies are kind of they might as well be in a genre of their own. A Rocky movie is almost an entire genre, like a James Bond movie, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's a whole universe of other boxing movies out there, good, bad, somewhere in the middle, and we're gonna dig into those in the future. And we're probably also going to have to dig into the original Rocky a little harder at some point.
The deep dive.
A deep dive, yeah. Well, as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the holiday season, and Rocky's one of those weird movies that actually has Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's in it.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. They go right through Christmas.
Yep, and his date with Adrian was on Thanksgiving. They show Christmas when Paulie gets drunk and breaks everything with a bat, and the fight is on New Year's.
The fight is... Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and it's Philadelphia in winter, so it was always I watched Rocky a lot, but I always made sure, and now as an adult, I don't watch it that often because I've seen it so many fucking times, but usually I'll do a watch of that and Rocky Balboa around this time of year. And Rocky Balboa, too, was filmed in the winter in Philly. And I was actually in Philadelphia at our friend Kevin's apartment when they filmed the scene of him running up the steps with his dog.
Oh, you were there for that. Cool.
Yeah, and I thought you were, but my memory isn't that great because it was a serious hangover morning, and we were young, and I just remember being on the balcony, smoking a cigarette, and these giant snowflakes started falling. And I just remember it was unusual that it was that long of a snow shower with flakes that big. And then I came to find out on the news the next day that they said they filmed a new scene for the upcoming Rocky movie at the art museum steps that day during the snow. And sure enough, that's the scene that ended up in the movie. And you can see those big fucking flakes really showed that's real snow. That's not giant Hollywood snow. That's real snow. And then it looks great.
That was only a couple blocks from the museum, too.
Yeah, we were really close.
Real close.
We were really close. It was the Liberty Towers, right?
Yeah, right down the street.
Yep, really close. We used to go down the Parkway to leave.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I had been on a different side of the building, I might have been able to see the trucks, the camera trucks. So yeah, rock and roll, man. Philadelphia, winter, Rocky, it's all good stuff.